Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you're just tuning in, we just finished going over what the situation is with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. In this segment, we continue our talk about some players, coaches in the NFL that just did not have the best season and what their future holds. In this segment, we talk about Aaron Rodgers. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit of Aaron Rodgers talk. This is something that came across my timeline earlier on. I think it was yesterday or today. I don't remember. But it was talking about that quote that Aaron Rodgers had where he said, "Down years for me are career years for a lot of other guys." And he's not exactly wrong about that, right? Most of the time, his down years are career years. But I thought this year, maybe that's an exception to the rule because he had, by pretty much a lot of extents, or at least from the eye test, a pretty bad season, right? This is not something that you can take a look at and say, hey, Aaron Rodgers, he's a top 20 quarterback in the league this year, because I don't think he was. But when you go back and you look at the stats, and again, I know stats aren't everything, but you look at the stats, and this year, narrative-wise, will go down as probably the worst in his career. But you look at the stats, it probably blends in with a lot of other guys this year. He had 3,897 yards, so almost 4,000 yards passing. He only had 28 interceptions, 28 touchdowns to just 11 interceptions. That's a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio. Not what you're used to for Aaron Rodgers, but still a pretty good season for just about anybody else, and a 90 quarterback rating. That's pretty good. Again, not elite like you expect him to be, but what he's been able to do, even on a team that was such a disaster, partially his fault, was incredibly impressive. And I think we need to take a step back for the people that are saying Aaron Rodgers is going to retire, he's done. I just don't see it. He's got 1 year left on that contract that he signed. He's going to his age 42 season, and he really got going down the stretch of this football season. I expect, honestly, the Jets to bring him back. They're conducting interviews, right? They're going out and they're trying to find their new GM/head coach. The issue is with this Jets job specifically, they went so hard in onto Aaron Rodgers that when he doesn't work out, when he retires, unless they can get a stopgap quarterback like that, someone that can immediately step in and be a great quarterback, they are going to fall off the face of the earth more than they already have, because they have put everything into winning now. They have nothing invested into the future for a guy after Aaron Rodgers. And that's not necessarily wrong. We all thought, or at least I thought, I was guilty of this. Definitely what I was the most incorrect on all season was the Jets. I had them going to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the season, right? We see where that is now. They have a top 10 pick in the draft. I was way off over there. But this is a team that when you look at it on paper is amazing, right? It really is. They had that defense just 2 seasons ago now, where arguably the best in football. That didn't translate. But what Aaron Rodgers has done in a disaster of a season wasn't that bad. You go back and you revisit that quote. A down year for him is a career year for a lot of guys. And while this isn't a career year for a lot of guys, it is a solid year. If a guy went out there, if Baker Mayfield went out and put stats like this, 3,900 yards, 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, you would be happy with that. Sure, he'd had a better year this year, but that was a career year for him. You would be happy with that. You would honestly be happy if Jared Goff went out and put that up, right? These are numbers that you're happy if your quarterback does, except if you're expecting more. If Aaron come back, which I expect him to do, Anthony says he thinks the Jets will draft a young quarterback in the second round, and I don't necessarily hate that, right? But on the off chance that Aaron Rodgers is not invited back to the Jets, which I totally expect any head coach they hire to have that kind of, hey, we expect Aaron Rodgers back for at least one more season. There's a bunch of other teams that I expect would be interested in his talents. There are so many quarterback needy teams this year, and there's only one, potentially two quarterbacks in this draft that I think are really guys you can put your hopes and dreams on, right? And that's going to go to the Titans. The Titans are going to take that number one guy, whoever it is, potentially the Browns if they think there's a second. But after that, there's nobody left that you can look at. So we're going to look at, I picked 7 teams that I think potentially would be interested in the services of Aaron Rodgers. We're going to start from 7 down. At number 7, it's the Miami Dolphins. And this one might seem a little bit outside the box for Aaron Rodgers to go to. But it's a team that's successful, and they're going to rely on Tua more. If the Dolphins went and brought him in, it would be as a backup role to Tua, because we've seen how bad that team is when they don't have a backup quarterback, right? They've struggled to find a backup quarterback really all of Tua's career. He's had a lot of trouble, a whole lot of trouble, finding a guy that can come in and be a solid backup for him. I think the Dolphins are one that you could pay attention to, and if Aaron Rodgers is done with the Jets, maybe he just wants to take a little bit of a backseat, continue to play out his contract, the Dolphins would be a really interesting spot for him. At number 6, counting down here, it's the Colts. They also have a very interesting quarterback situation. Obviously, we saw what happened with them and Joe Flacco this season. He's probably not coming back. Anthony Richardson, I don't know what they're going to do with him. I really don't. That's one of the biggest questions of the offseason. Anthony Richardson is a guy that I think should get another shot, but I wouldn't be mad at the Colts if they gave up at him at this point. It's a lot to take care of. It's a lot to figure out. Maybe that's a potential landing spot for Aaron Rodgers. He's got that relationship with Pat McAfee already in Indianapolis. Maybe he goes over there and joins the Colts. Now we have the real teams. There's 5 teams that I think really could go out and get him seriously. At number 5, it's the Giants. I don't really see the Giants doing this because I think they're trying to hit a hard reset button, find a young quarterback to build around. Maybe they want to stopgap or Aaron Rodgers for 1 year, but any longer than that, I just don't see the Giants really doing it. They could do it, though. That's a team that's out there. Another team that could potentially do it, it's the Browns. I talked about the Browns maybe getting a quarterback, but there's been a lot of mocks out there where they go and get a guy like Travis Hunter. They draft the best defender available, the best offensive tackle available, and under that, I'm assuming they go and get a veteran quarterback. If you're trying to find a veteran quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, one of those better ones to be out there. Browns, I think, are a possibility. Number 4 for a place he could go if he doesn't return to the Jets. And number 3, it's the Raiders. They need a quarterback really badly. They really do. They're outside of range to get a real quarterback. They fired their GM and their head coach. They're looking for a search. Rumors circling that Bill Belichick could get in there. I doubt that Bill Belichick actually does decide to go in there, but there's another spot, the Raiders, that I think are going to pay a lot of money for a quarterback this year. And I think Aaron Rodgers might be on the table for them. And number 2, it's the Vikings. It's not one of those he's going to follow the Brett Favre route, but I think there's a world out there where Sam Darnold signs a massive contract somewhere that isn't the Vikings. He signs a massive contract with, say, the Raiders. He signs a massive contract with, say, the Dolphins. With say the Giants, right? He signs a massive contract somewhere that really wants a guy that just had a resurgent year, like Sam Darnold did. Now they need a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers comes in, they let J.J. McCarthy sit for yet another year. That could be something that works, especially with all the weapons that are over there. Now, you also have a Davante Adams that's going to be ready to go, basically follow him anywhere if that happens. So that's kind of a 2-for-1 deal. A lot of teams would be interested. But the number 1 team, we just finished talking about them, that I think would be interested in Aaron Rodgers should he return and the Jets not want him, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. We just went off on Mike Tomlin for not being able to find a quarterback. And sure, this wouldn't be a long-term solution. But if you throw Aaron Rodgers in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, that is going to be the best quarterback they have had since Big Ben was in his prime. Regardless, it's going to be better than Justin Fields. It's going to be better than what Russell Wilson brings to that team, right? You also bring in potentially Davante Adams with you. That shores up the wide receiver core, gives another weapon outside of George Pickens. That is going to be a really, really nice landing spot for him, and one that honestly I think really could happen. Those are a couple places. I just don't see a way that Aaron Rodgers is done with football after this year. Now, Anthony asked a question a lot earlier about Aaron Rodgers post his career, what he would look like as a quarterback's coach. And honestly, there's lots of story about him being a diva out there. There's lots of stories about him being this egotistical guy. But honestly, I think he would be a really good coach. He's got that football mind that is was one of one. It's super rare to see guys like that. Do I think he would be an elite coach? Is he a guy that I'm tapping on and saying, you're going to be a coach? I don't think he'll do it. But I think if he was interested in becoming a coach, and that was something he was actually passionate about, he would be really good at being a football coach, especially a quarterback's coach. And that's something that I think could work out for him in the future. I don't see it happening this year because, like I said, I definitely think he's coming back, and I think the Jets will take him. But I also think if the Jets don't take him back, there are about 6, 5, 7 other teams that would be very interested in bringing in a guy like Aaron Rodgers to run their franchise at least for 1 year. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we take a quick dive into the world of basketball. A potential finals matchup took place last night. We're going to talk about everything that came of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.